Hello?
Identity Fraud was a game that I would always see on the front page when I was younger, but I never really understood why. I thought it was just a game about empty halls and spooky monsters, which was right to a certain extent, but I never really appreciated its ingenuity. After returning to this game nearly a decade late, however, I can finally say that I get it. Although it can be buggy or confusing at times, for a game that was released over 9 years ago, Identity Fraud really surprised me with its unique monsters and creative puzzles, and I genuinely think that it was ahead of its time. With all of that said, let me start my review with the iconic first maze, the Labyrinth. Oh, actually, before we begin, I'll explain the story of the game. Our character is schizophrenic.
Okay, so the first night is never usually that bad in any of the games, so I'll play through.
Anyway, enjoy the video. The Labyrinth is a series of corridors recognized for its beige bricks, flickering lanterns, and ominous shadow entities. Despite only being the first maze, it actually has the highest amount of monsters, with Stan, Ralph, and Fraud hunting you down. Oh yeah, I'll also be ranking these guys because I thought it would be fun. I'll start by talking about Stan since he's definitely the most popular character from this game. Even before I played Identity Fraud for this video, I knew who this guy was because his simple shadow figure with glowing eyes design is so iconic, and one of my favorite moments in this game came from when I first encountered him. I was cluelessly walking around the maze unsure of what monsters were stalking me, until I turned around to see this guy duck behind a wall and try to pretend like he didn't get caught with his pants down. Honestly, this tiny addition made Stan go from a pretty mediocre weeping angel copycat that bugs out half the time to a contender for my favorite entity in the game. He can definitely be a little bit annoying at times, but there's something about seeing this goofy shadow creature stalking me that makes my face light up when I see it. Now for the tier list. I'm judging each monster based on the creativity of their design and also how fun they are to encounter. That being said, I'm going to put Stan in A tier because while he's not that creative, he really is iconic. If this was a dumb mascot horror game, Stan would definitely be the character who gets plastered all over the thumbnail. Actually, I even used him in my own thumbnail, so I think he deserves that spot. Anyway, that's enough Stan glaze. Next up is Ralph, the overarmored and overarmed edgelord. Ralph is the closest thing this game has to a generic slasher. He patrols the first maze and has the potential to outrun you if you get spotted. It's possible to shake him off your tail if you round enough corners though, as he loses momentum when he turns. While he's the most basic character here, he's also the most well balanced, so I'm going to put him in B tier. Lastly, we have Fraud. Fraud is a shapeshifter who will take the form of whichever player they killed last. If you spot Fraud, they will wave at you, and if you don't look away in time, a chase will ensue. Once the chase begins, it's practically impossible to get away. They're easily the most overpowered monster in the game, which is why I'm putting them in C tier. The only reason they aren't in D tier is because their concept is amazing and they have the potential to be the coolest monster here. That's it for the monsters in Maze 1, but before I move on to Maze 2, I want to get my biggest gripe with this game out of the way because it applies to Maze 1 the most. There is absolutely zero direction given to the player. If you ever step foot in this place, it's a guarantee that it will take you a back-breaking amount of walking, a never-ending loop of second-guessing which way leads out, and 4 surges of adrenaline before you finally reach the exit. Walking around 3 mazes back-to-back without knowing where you're going isn't very fun, and getting killed by a monster you don't know the mechanics of isn't very fun either. Thankfully, these problems can be alleviated by looking up a map on the game's wiki or researching whatever monster is giving you trouble, but it shouldn't be up to the player to find a workaround for the game's shortcomings. My advice would be to give the player a map so they're not just wandering around aimlessly, and they instead have a clear objective. I also think that when a player dies, a death screen should appear for whichever monster they died to. Including the monster's weakness in this screen would help to teach the player how to actually survive and make progress. I'd like to briefly take a detour and use doors to illustrate why I think these would be good ideas for Identity Fraud. Both of these games are quite similar, where you have to get from point A to B while evading a cast of entities. Doors, however, has a much more linear design where you walk from door 1 to 2 to 3 and so on. This doesn't get boring for the player because they are constantly seeing themselves making progress. Now let's think back to Identity Fraud, where you walk in a big circle until you either find the exit by getting lucky or by looking up a walkthrough. A map would seriously help the player out, and the same goes for death screens. The developers could also use small cutscenes to show how different monsters work, like how Figure is introduced indoors, but I think that a death screen is good enough. That's the only real criticism I have for the game. Even though I yapped about it for a while, it doesn't bother me too much because, as I said, it can be alleviated by just looking things up yourself, but it would definitely be nice if the game made an effort to help new players get their bearings. With that out of the way, I can continue talking about the mazes. Maze 2, the Hedge Maze, is the largest area in the game by far. The maze is quite safe though, as there's only 2 monsters present, those being Stan and a new entity, Kate. Before I talk about Kate though, I need to address that I'll be referring to them as Kate because Kate is the official name given to her by the developer, while Alice is an unofficial name given to her by the community. Anyway, Kate is similar to Fraud in the sense that they're another character with an awesome concept but terrible execution. My main complaint with her is that she never appears. During the multiple playthroughs I've done of this game, she's only appeared for me once, and I could barely tell what made her special. I think she's around the same speed as the player, so during my one encounter with her she was kinda just there. I didn't even know about her gimmick until I read about it on the wiki. What I learned was that she transforms based on the status of the maze's lights. Basically the lights in Maze 2 alternate between being on and off every 5 minutes, so when the lights are on, Kate is a harmless firefly, but when they switch off, Kate transforms into the monster. This is actually a really cool concept that the developers could have used way better. One idea I had was to make the firefly form of Kate a guide for the player. When the lights are on, Kate would guide the player towards the next camp, and when they turn off, Kate would change into the monster and chase the player. I would also give the player control over how the lights function. Instead of them just turning on and off every 5 minutes, I would place some generators around the maze that the player can run to in order to turn the lights on for a short amount of time before they turn back off again. There could also be multiple Kates to make sure it isn't a cakewalk when there's more than one person in the maze. That's all I have to say about Kate though. I'm going to put her in C tier because I honestly just don't have enough information about her. Finally, let's talk about Maze 3, the facility. This maze is a lot more claustrophobic as the new entity, James, will stay close to the player at all times. This isn't annoying though, as all that the player has to do in order to avoid James is stand perfectly still. As long as you aren't moving, James doesn't see you as a threat, which means that Stan is really the only entity that can kill you in this maze. These two are a great power couple because Stan usually has a difficult time catching up to the player when they are just walking normally. James forces the player to stand still however, which leaves you in a much more vulnerable position that Stan takes advantage of. I really like James and how well he bounces off of Stan's mechanics, but I do think he makes this maze a little bit too easy with how simple his gimmick is, so for that reason I'm going to put him in A tier. I'm moving away from talking about the monsters for a minute to shift my focus towards the puzzles in this game. The reason I'm only mentioning them now is because all of the puzzles are crammed in at the end of Maze 3. There is one puzzle you can do in Maze 2 to get into the disco room, but it's completely optional, and as for Maze 1, there's an endurance test at the exit where you have to not tab out of the game while you stare at the big red button and wait for it to turn green. Fortunately the puzzles in Maze 3 are slightly more entertaining. When you reach the exit to the maze, the door will be locked with a small radio beside it. This radio beeps Morse code that you have to transcribe yourself in order to get the code. I actually really like this puzzle because the answer is randomized in every server, so even if it's your second or third time playing the game you still have to make an effort to solve the puzzle instead of just memorizing it. Once you progress through the door you make it to the... Hold on. I've seen this place before. The end of the hall presents you with one final puzzle. A slab with hexadecimal code engraved in it. After solving this one the doors to the maze open, you walk into a dark room as the entrance shuts behind you, and the credits roll. Sorry, I was kidding about that last part. The way this horror puzzle game actually ends is with a boss fight. Remember earlier when I said that my biggest gripe with this game was the lack of direction given to the player? Well, I wasn't lying about that, but this fight is pushing its way to being my least favorite part. It comes out of left field and is really generic. You're given a rocket launcher to damage the boss, who has 2 phases. In the first phase, they have this ridiculously overpowered aimbot laser that will kill you in seconds if you aren't behind cover, so in order to survive you need to hide behind a pillar, stand still, and shoot the boss. This is really boring and it felt like I was cheesing the game, but it's the only way you can win. The second phase is a slight improvement because instead of standing still and left clicking, you have to move a little bit and then left click, but it isn't much better. Thankfully the fight is short, so after those two phases are over, the boss explodes and the credits roll. It really is a letdown that this is how the game ends. Before I plot this guy on the tier list though, I want to discuss hard mode for a minute. Hard mode is the only other difficulty option in the game, and what it does is it removes all of your game passes, it removes all of the checkpoints, and it makes every attack in the game one-shot you. Now the first two stipulations I don't mind. Going through all 3 mazes without dying is a fun challenge that can increase replayability, which is good since this game is pretty short. What I have a problem with however is the no damage modifier, because it changes the difficulty of the game exponentially. Instead of the difficulty basically remaining the same throughout the entire game, the first 3 mazes are really easy and the final boss is really hard. Let me explain. The no damage rule doesn't affect any monsters in the first and second mazes because they all kill you in one shot, and as I've stated multiple times before, James is really easy to counter, so even though he's slightly more dangerous in hard mode, he still isn't a major threat. The final boss on the other hand has that aimbot laser I mentioned earlier, so if you peek out from behind cover for even a second you die instantly and get sent back to maze 1. Honestly the fight with the boss isn't even that difficult, but it's realistically the only point of the game that you're gonna die at, so it makes the first 3 mazes feel like a long and tedious run back instead of an actual fair challenge. Everything that surrounds this boss is by far the weakest part of the game, so for that reason I'm going to put them in D tier. They're the only entity that I don't like anything about. I already established that I don't think he's very fun to fight, but his design is also terrible. He's just a red armored creature without a name, only being referred to unofficially as the Hurdle. He's genuinely the only person on this list that I would remove from the game entirely. Before I start wrapping up though, I want to address why there's an S tier without anything in it. While I like a lot of the monsters here, I don't think that any of them are perfect, even the ones that I glazed. All of them would benefit from some improvements, so I thought it would be a good idea to leave the S tier there to show this. Also I know I've been ranting for a large portion of this video, but I still like this game. It's just that there's a lot more that needs to be explained when pointing out a game's negatives compared to the positives, which can usually be summarized in just a line. I do think that Identity Fraud was ahead of its time though, because it created so many cool monsters and puzzles with nothing but the basic Roblox movement and chat features. That's all I have to say about Identity Fraud though, so if you have any recommendations for what games I should play next or have general improvements for my videos, please leave them in the comments below. You're always welcome to subscribe, and other than that, thank you all for watching and I'll see you next time.